Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Monitor Keeping Podcast. I'm Alan here with Khai again, and today it's just going to be the two of us. It's been a little while. We've had, some busy times lately, so we're glad to get back and record. Yeah,
a lot of horrors, man. A lot of stuff going on in the last few weeks.
So today we're going to get into all that and some of the bad stuff. I guess is that what we'd call this episode, Khai?
Yeah, no drama. Just all the bad stuff that happens to us really personally with our, our get up every day or throughout the week, or how we flow with things. There are things that are gonna basically make you cry a little bit, or really make you question what you're doing. Sometimes it makes you go to the board and erase everything off and redo everything again.
Yeah.
This podcast is about things like that. Basically, the stuff that makes us cringe. The nail biting stuff, the heartbreaking stuff. And we'll try to get into as much as we can. That way, maybe some of you guys can avoid the situation as well, because chances are other people are running into the same problem.
Right. And again, we just want to say thank you to the Morelia Python Radio Network for allowing this to happen, for us being under their umbrella. Go onto their website, check them out, check out all the different podcasts that are on there. I think it was kind of slow for everybody a little bit. Maybe I'm saying too much, but just it's a busy time. It seems like a couple big reptile shows, other things going on. So
back-to-back stuff that kind of makes things hard,
Yeah.
And then on top of that, what we do is not selling shoes or a coat that you can put on a rack. The animals are a day-to-day still, and you having to do, show stuff or busy life stuff, basically kind of can interfere with that, or that can interfere with your own life. You know what I mean? And so, kind of juggle it all together. Yeah. So
perfect for the things that go wrong.
So yeah, my connection is a little spotty. yeah, there's a lot of things that go wrong, but I guess we can get right into it, man. With everybody's dealing with this right now, and FedEx is in the hot seat, and so I think I myself deal with stuff weekly, but Alan himself recently had a terrible hiccup. Do you want to talk about that real quick, just so we can kind of get into some of the heartbreak
So I've been
stuff?
putting together this Dorianus project, right? And I'm super excited about it. It started with this great looking female that Khai had access to. And unfortunately, so I started piecing these animals together, looking for exceptional animals that I wanted to work with. And this orange spot pastel female, I mean, just out of this world, was the reason to start this project. So one of the other animals I found was another really good looking animal, male, who a guy had posted online. And so I found someone to help, ship the animal to me, because the original owner didn't want to ship. Well, basically what happened is it got shipped to me right on the plane, got dropped off at the airport, boxed correctly. I mean, the guy has plenty of experience boxing high dollar animals. The weather was great. And then there was a hiccup with FedEx, and the animal got held over for an extra 24 hours. Needless to say, when I get the box the next morning, dead on arrival. So, I mean, this was one that had been raised, doing good, from a small individual, now about, I would say, 2.5, 3 feet. And I don't even know what to make of it, but yeah, it was dead on arrival. Yeah.
FedEx's fault. And a lot of us have had to deal with that recently. Not some of it not too bad. It's more stress than anything, but we're already high stress as it is sending an animal on the plane, right? We basically want everything to flow smoothly. Some tips, whether you're receiving or shipping, you kind of want to do some math work with temperature and how you're going to box things or get things shipped to you. Even if you're not the shipper, you yourself can kind of have some standards on how you want things shipped to you as well. You kind of mention it in the thing, talk about a phase 2 pack, or if it's really cold, talk about a heat pack. If it's really hot, talk about other things to basically balance out the temperature. And so within this episode, we'll try to get into specific details like that, where you're not just going to be so much as left with at the mercy of FedEx. Even though we can't do a whole lot once the package is lost, other than having the third party, which is like Ship Your Reptiles or Reptiles Express, communicate with us. I myself have had mostly just hiccups. Nothing that I've sent out died yet, but essentially things get held up in the mail. There's COVID issues or loss of staff or lack of staff, or the weather is crazy, basically storms and things like that impeding the shipping service. So essentially things are all shut down, or like the stuff that happened in Texas, where Texas froze over, remember? And Texas was never really expected to.
Yeah, Kai was right. There's different things that happen. I mean, we're getting alerts if you're using any of these companies that FedEx is just they're have shortages on people, shortages on availability of, I guess, ways to move packages right now. So they're having to condense their resources a little bit into certain areas. And this is the heads up that's been coming in the last week or two. So I'm very hesitant to ship in the next couple of months, especially going into the holidays. It's going to get nuts. Plus the weather, is going to get colder. So I might be holding on to things till springtime, to be honest, just to hopefully get through this.
It's what I had to do last year.
Welcome back, Kai.
Thanks, man. That's what I had to do last year. I had to hold stuff back, and some people were fine. Some people were quite impatient, and they obviously didn't want to. There are people out there that are kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit and ship throughout all the whole year. They just kind of, I don't know, maybe like really risk it or chance it, but some packages make it fine. Some don't. Some people are really experienced with shipping. Getting back into what I was kind of mentioning earlier, like for myself, when I ship, I kind of do a couple things. So I take the temperature of where I'm at, how it's going to be, and temperature of the destination. But most people forget the layover state. That is where you need to be paying attention a lot. Right. And that's going to be the crucial
Memphis,
the crucial area. Even if it's several hours, if they say, and sometimes they'll warn you about stuff that happens in Memphis or Indianapolis, which are the two sort of, I guess, when you're traveling across the United States back and forth, like all the way to the East Coast, you'll be hitting one or two of those hubs, and so that making sure that layover state isn't either freezing or overheated as well. So as far as the temperatures go, you kind of want them to be somewhat similar, not like 90 degrees here, but it's only going to be 40 degrees at that other state. And right now, those are the temperatures that we're certainly facing. Some places are still extremely hot in the 90s, and some places are 40s. Like my friend from Washington told me to basically use a heat pack for the stuff that I was sending him, because it's now already starting to get chilly. So paying attention to those things, essentially you'll be able to check the tracking number, and it'll give you a certain code, and that'll determine whether it's going to Indianapolis or Memphis. And a lot of the third-party shipping companies will have a bracket and something like this explained for you, so you can be able to read it much simpler. You don't want to just be like, all right, I'm at the mercy of the shipper, I'm at the mercy of the third party, and you're at the mercy of the FedEx hub, right? You want to still be somewhat in control, but you kind of want to be aware of the situations and how they flow progressively, or if they don't. Like for me, when I check the FedEx at 4 a.m, because I do weird stuff like that, I'm expecting that the destination to say at hub facility or at ship center being distributed or something like that. That means things has basically gone to the third or fourth step prior to getting to the customer, prior to them picking it up. So you'll see as they update your tracking, you'll get these things, and this is what you got to pay attention to. Now, things happen. I get packages and I ship them weekly, and I get delayed weekly. It sucks. And it luckily I go through a place, and they essentially update me on the hour or every few hours that the package is late. They'll basically mention me that this thing is being held at the facility. There's a temperature control room, and those things I look for in a third party where they're communicating with you,
right,
basically on the up and up with stuff. You don't want to be left in the wind, because it sucks. You got an animal in the air, or you got an animal stuck somewhere, and you're trying to get it, and you want to be able to know what you're working with, and still be able to navigate through the system, because a lot of times they'll play dumb, or there's just so much tape that you kind of have to go through just to get them to really pay attention to you or take you seriously. And so these are those avenues that you want to be sure of before you get things shipped to you or you ship yourself.
But while we're talking about shipping and Kai's working out whatever that is going on, I will say that I shipped somebody basically a clutch of Ackies just in the last few weeks, and I originally had been shipping baby monitors in deli cups until there was a Tristis I had to put into a deli cup and actually pinched its tail. Now, I was super careful about doing it, but they were just so quick, and all of a sudden that tail pops up, and when it pinched, the animal then freaked out also and began twisting like a little crocodile. And I mean that tail tip had no
tail's
chance.
Gone. Yeah, tail's gone.
So to prevent that, if I was just shipping one or two animals, I usually still put them in deli cups. But when I was shipping more than one animal, instead of loading up on deli cups, I would put them in just a bag, a reptile bag with some paper towels or something. And I've been doing this for a while now. I haven't had any issues. Well, this guy gets this order, and it's like one of the babies in there decided to go crazy on the rest of them. So some of them had little bite marks, nothing really significant, but one had like from its ear almost to its eye, like this bite wound, and I still haven't seen anything like that out of babies just keeping and raising babies. But I'm like, I'm beginning to think, did I flick it in the head somehow, or did I take a sander to the side of this thing's face? But we just determined it was done en route to him. It happened. Yeah. And I started asking for advice, and I started freaking out, asking some of the guys that have been doing this for a long time, what do you do? And unfortunately, sometimes things just happen.
You got to eat that and then return whatever to the customer, or make sure that you got to make that right.
Right.
Some of the things that we have to do as people with integrity in this hobby, we want to make sure people are satisfied with what they got. Even if we took a loss, that's basically a loss. But
absolutely,
hey, what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, make it right.
Yeah, basically make it right. And so that's a tough one, man, because it's like, man, I didn't do that. That little lizard did that.
Right. And it killed me, though. It absolutely killed me. Things were everywhere at the time, but I wanted to make sure that this shipment got to this guy correctly. And actually, before this, so I had there was two different clutches, two different types of Ackies, basically. I say types, but two different line kind of breeding things that I was sending him. And I had 5 of one of them. Two babies got out. Now I use these same baby enclosures for all my babies. I mean, for the Kimberleys, Tristis, all kinds of Ackies. I've had all kinds of things in there, right? Never had an issue. Not one that I didn't cause. And somehow these two babies Houdini'd their way out of this thing. And of course, this happens like the day of shipping, right? Or the day before I'm shipping. My warehouse is huge as far as nooks and crannies and where things can hide. And it's like, oh, there's no chance in finding these things within this time period. So that's how this whole thing started off. I was like, hey, Um, I lost two. And he's like, what do you mean you lost two? Yeah, well, I lost two. I had to eat that, feel crunchy, but be truthful, be honest, and say, hey, here's what I can do. I ended up
Yeah.
in the process, which we might get into later in this, I had to rip the entire warehouse down to the bones, down to the walls. Not
Yeah.
specifically for this animal, but I did find one of them. There's a few other places where I'm still hoping the other one might be, but yeah, I did find one of them. So hopefully that other one will pop up soon. Man, I've had a
Yeah.
lot of bad recently. So should I just continue? You want to jump in here, Kai?
No, it's. I think my connection's a whole lot better now. Switched
Oh
over
yeah,
a little
whatever
bit.
you did.
Yeah. So
You're not as
with
pixelated.
with with my my current Kimberly clutches, I just finished shipping out the last one for now, right?
Nice.
And man, almost every single one of those was a hiccup in shipping.
Mm.
Like maybe two of them went really smooth, but the rest of them were all nail biters. And yeah, just waiting for those to make it. One of them I shipped like during when it was 90 degrees for me, but only 85 for the gentleman over where they were going, right? But I was kind of scared. I was like, man, it's 92 hot. Let me just try it.
Right.
I'm gonna
Aussie
chance
species
it.
be good. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like, all right, it's not too bad. So on myself, I have to really, it's like, dang, you got to test things out, almost like, all right, I guess if it doesn't make it, I'll have to eat this, but if it makes it, great.
Right.
Yeah. um you know I mean, going back with the Dorianis thing, the whole hiccup with that, they don't, it isn't, nothing comes easy, and so if you're starting an amazing project like that, essentially, man, those like two hiccups like back to back.
So what Kai's referring to is this awesome female that Kai was able to get his hands on. It had a couple like issues, some rub marks and whatnot. Basically, Kai spent some time nursing this thing back to health, making sure those are cleared up. And so finally, we put together a shipping date, and he ships out this beautiful animal to me, and I'm stoked. The whole reason for this project is built around this animal. Um, and she's doing great. I have her for about a week in cages that I've now used plenty of times with different animals. I know how the cages function in my rooms and setups, and as far as I could tell, I was seeing poop. I knew she wasn't in front of me, but I was seeing poop. The morning of, I go to change her water, and she runs away from me. No big deal. She's active, you know. Moving, and I'm making sure she had fresh water. That evening, I go back to look in the cage, and there she is, like not moving. And I'm like, wow, I must have snuck up on her. She's sleeping. I pick her up, I open the top, and there's no movement. So already my heart's starting to sink. And I had her about a week, and she'd been doing fine. And I pick her up dead as a doornail. And I've decided I did freeze her. I'm going to get a necro done on her because I'm at a loss. Just what the heck happened?
Yeah.
I even sent Kai a video kind of showing the entire animal because there's not a loss of body weight. There's no bites. She was by herself the entire time.
Yeah.
And like I've said, I know the temps of this enclosure, so I've checked them before and after.
The other animals were fine too that are neighboring animals. So it's like,
right.
Yeah, so it's a hard one. It's one of those things where we're sort of out of our control, just where it's like, man, and it's another hard pill to swallow. It's almost like, I put in this time, this money, effort, all this stuff like that, and then to kind of lose it, there's almost nothing to really do. And then when you can't figure out what was the issue, it's like even more mind-boggling.
Right.
And you just really sit back. You really try to, something that you may pick up later on, or you may not pick up at all. And we just kind of just move on, try to keep that in the back of your mind, but you still want to continue to move on and move forward. And the process though, and getting more animals has been on the up and up now for him, right? As far as getting more Dorianis.
Yeah, I decided I'm doing this, so I'm sticking with it. I got it like a 5-year outlook kind of on this project. That's to get them tuned in to how I'm keeping them, for me to learn honestly how to keep them. and to hopefully get some reproductive success out of them.
Yeah, man. Dorianus would be amazing tap in because, essentially we're trying to really figure out the species itself. It's one of those things where there's a lot of things that can go wrong with the species as well, just because they're known to be aggressive and they can get quite large for people. It's like basically a Nile monitor almost in size. Yeah,
they can get large. Now I have I have 6. No, I have 5. But I'm looking to add that's another one that basically should. So here's the issue that I have now. I have the super like orange pastel, male. I want to find another one to pair that one with, of course. That's the look I absolutely love. But now I have these 2 real young ones that look more like your classic Dorianus, but they're starting to change into like bluish greenish spots on their back. So I have a feeling they're going to be something totally separate than the pastels. And then I have 2 that came in just recently. That one's about 3 foot, one's about 3.5 foot, and they have really nice turquoise, greens, blues all down the back that go into like orange and yellow spots on the back. But these are just spots, heavy black background still. So now I'm like, well, there's so much unknown. I'm certain these are different locales. So I might have to make some decisions here about, because they're big animals, what I'm actually going to keep and work with and what I'm not going to keep and work with, because there's so much variation, And I don't necessarily want to throw them all together.
Right. We're trying to keep it clean still, especially with what you got. So they may be locale specific, but at the same time, you kind of want to keep clean stuff lineage wise, and the whole the outlook too. And as far as like those horror stories that you got in, I mean, do you mind talking about some of the stuff that you had to deal with as you got these animals? They actually came in pretty decent, right? But there was some other.
They came right into California, and then basically the next day came up to me. So ended up getting a group of tree monitors and the Dorianus, and I mean, just some outstanding looking animals. And as far as imports go, I'm actually pretty happy with their condition. That being said, some of the ticks on these things, man, they were like the size of a corn kernel on some of them. One was stuck in this blue tree's ear that was just like, I mean, it had to affect the thing's hearing. One was stuck right into the neck of a green tree, just like this nasty old witch looking wart. And and there's like, if I had to guess, there's like 6 different species of ticks in these things. And and the way some of them would go, the ticks would like find an entry point, and they'd all, especially these bigger ticks, would all try to get into that same nook and cranny. So it was hard to pull them out accurately because they're so close together. Like, you want to make sure you get all the tick out. And so, wedging these tweezers in between. And then another thing, some of the smooth tweezers would just slide right off the back.
Slip off.
Right. So
it just clinks.
Yeah. So actually, some of like feeding tongs that have those little serrations in them, I had to get good with those. And then finally, what I ended up doing is using a really precise pair of like needle nose pliers that have those serrations. And that's what I'm doing a lot of. Now, along with that, I also tried something, a lot of the snake guys, maybe lizard guys too, I don't know, use Frontline dog and cat spray, okay? Just put this out there. It's been used. Use at your own risk, okay? I'm not telling you how to use it or anything. Do your own research. I'll just tell you what I did, okay? So with snakes, when you're treating snakes for like snake mites or something, it's recommended you spray it either onto some rubber gloves and then run your hands down the snake, or spray it onto like a paper towel, rub that paper towel. So it's not a direct spray. And I've used it on snakes. I've used it on imports or snakes that came in with stuff. It actually works great for killing mites. It's a product I wouldn't, and as far as snake use, I would recommend it. But I hadn't heard anybody using it with lizards, and especially for ticks. So I a lot of these smaller mites, they were just too tedious. I mean, we're talking mites, but hundreds of ticks
Yeah.
on these animals. And so I tried it out, and I was able to tell Khai, I think the next day, I saw these little round bodies go to little flat, dehydrated, like discolored discs. So I'm assuming they're dead. Now, the way that ticks work, their heads are basically still in the animal. So what I hope will happen is that I'm not going to go in removing them all. I'm going to keep. I plan on keeping all these animals for a few months to make sure they're locked on anyway before anything. If it leaves, I kind of want to keep everything. But basically, making sure everything's locked on. What I'm hoping will happen is that through these animals shedding, these ticks will come off, or the body will push them out because they're obviously dead. I even got this crazy. I got a pair of those like magnifying glasses that you actually wear like glasses, and the little light on top, so I can really see in there when I'm doing this stuff. And I got one of those. My wife works in skincare, so she had this old light sitting around, which is like a magnifying glass with all the LEDs around it, so you can hold an animal up under there. And it's actually kind of this is going to sound sick. It's kind of relaxing. You sit there with a calm animal now, and you're picking ticks off. Put them in a little water pool. It's gross at first, and then it kind of gets soothing.
Nasty, man, nasty. I haven't dealt with ticks in quite a while. I'm actually pretty glad. Those when you look at them, and you even like even mites, I just feel like they're all over me. And then
oh yeah,
I know they're not all over me or the collection, but I just feel that way.
I have to yell at everybody coming through the house. They know I'm coming through naked now because everything I went through the garage, everything's in the washing machine. Even tennis shoes. Yeah. I wash them with the clothes now when I'm over there doing that.
Man, and it's good to be the precautions that we're kind of taking. It sounds silly, right? A little tick, but I mean the one or two that you may have forgotten or missed up, I guess can take care and wipe out your whole collection essentially. Yep. In a way. So you want to be careful. We kind of joke about this horror one, but going into it, sanitize and be sanitary. Utilize things that you're either never going to utilize on something else, or you basically sterilize the heck out of it to utilize it again.
Right.
And then you'll have to also treat the animal after you pull that stuff off. Essentially, there'll be a ton of micro wounds all over. Right. So yeah, you want to be careful with that as well, especially if you're pulling off hundreds of ticks. It'll just be like a mangy looking dog, with a bunch of little bites on it. It's kind of the same thing a little bit. So
here's what now. I've had the experience with like the peacocks and the Timors dwarf stuff. They didn't come in with any ticks. I mean, they came in as small, basically fresh babies, a few years ago now. So they've all done great except for like one that was obviously scrawny and sick when I got it. The rest of them have done great, not a problem. But these are kind of like some older animals. They're either subadults or adults. And the tick issue, it's kind of unique. So the way I have these cages set up, I turn these wood crates into cages basically. Kai's seen them. They're coated on the inside so they're waterproof, but they're also, I can spray them down on the inside. I can spray them with a chemical. They're pretty resistant to I tested it with a chemical I'm going to be using for this stuff too. And they're pretty resistant to UV, like sun exposure, so I can leave them out in the sun basically. Bleach shouldn't have any effect on it. It's not like I'm letting it sit in there. It's diluted bleach, but and then so what I'm doing is I'm using the cocoa husks, or I'm sorry, the chips as my substrate for now. And then they have access to plenty of cork tubes and whatnot. Got some more cork tubes in actually today. And the idea with that is basically on a weekly basis, grabbing it. It's going to be stressful. I hate doing it with these imports, but all the stuff's coming out. All the bedding's coming out. That bedding's going right into a trash bag. That trash bag's either going in the trash at a different location, or it's getting burned in a burn pile. It's because it's cocoa chips. And then the cage is getting sprayed out. I also have more cages than I do animals that I've prepped now. So I can leave one out that's being sanitized, leave it outside in the sun or whatnot, let it dry out, let it air out, and then bring it back in. And what I plan to do with the cork is just to switch the cork. I'm going to basically have an A bin full of cork and a B bin full of cork. And so the plan is to sterilize, sanitize, one of the bins or one of the larger groups of cork, and then add in the new stuff. That's my hope, along with those. I had to move the bugs into another room. So they're on one side of the warehouse now. And what I'm using is those, I picked those no pest strips up today and just cutting those up a little bit. And,
nice.
I don't use it. They're not in there constantly. They're not in there every day. Most of the times when I'm in there, the roll up door up front is open. So there'll be about like a day on, 2 days off, a day with them in there, 2 days off type of thing. So
nice.
That's what I'm trying for now. But I mean, there's been other things,
there's been a lot of headache stuff, a lot of freaking nail biting stuff. I guess some more stuff that is sort of out of our control that we've dealt with before is incubating issues, man.
Mm-hmm.
I myself have had some stuff lately because the year here in Southern California where I live hasn't been as blistering hot. There actually hasn't been much for rolling blackouts and stuff like that they do in Los Angeles County. So I am crossing my fingers that we don't have to deal with anything like that. But for me, it's only really waiting about a day or so. If it's extremely hot, I kind of have to balance out the incubator and make it so it's not so hot. If it's like really, really blistering hot and it's 100 degrees and I can't really stop it, right? I'll just shove like a cold water bottle in there and kind of balances out the heat a little bit. And for the most part, I just sit tight. I don't fuss too much if it's just going to be several hours of a rolling blackout, Now, I haven't had the issue of wintertime yet and the eggs doing anything bad other than, condensating a lot. But that's something that I can kind of control and fluctuate with. It's just some of the things that are happening where it's like, dang, power outages or your thermostat, going crazy like yours, right? You had thermostat issues, no?
Yeah.
This is your second time.
Different incubator, different thermostat. I think it might have been a combination of things. So basically, as far as things going wrong, things going haywire, we had like beginning of August, the whole COVID thing. Then at my regular job, I had to go away once I got back from COVID, or not away, but every day we had like mandatory 12 to 16-hour shifts. So I wasn't getting a lot of sleep time or a lot of times to do things, to go deal with the fires up here in California. And then right after that, basically the county needed to come into the warehouse because of things that the landowner is doing. And they needed to inspect, like just visually inspect all the outlets in the warehouse. So that means like I had to, these big built-in cage, basically the back cages, I have the wall that's these built-in walk-in cages with a loft on top, where I had a lot of animals. And we're talking, the loft is like 14 feet by 8 feet. And then the cages are built under that, and they're 6 foot high cages. So I had to rip out everything basically. And then I had to store all the animals in the other enclosed. So we're talking in totes and bags, and I had to rip out like everything in there. Man, I'm still recovering. I'm still doing stuff. And it was just absolutely nuts, but it was something that had to be done. So an inspector comes one day because we're just trying to get my 2 units on their own meter. And we think it's a technician coming who's going to install this new meter. I don't know anything about this stuff. I'm just going off of what the landlord is telling me. So he just needs to see the panel in my unit, I thought. So he sees the panel, And he's like, oh yeah, I need to inspect all the outlets. And we're both looking at each other, me and my landlord. What do you mean inspect the outlets? He goes, yeah, I need to see all the outlets. And I had this painter's plastic up that you can't see through. And long story short, I had all the cages in the loft like blocked off. The It wasn't a technician they sent out. They had to send out basically an inspector first before a technician to make sure everything's good. They thought I had like a big weed grow going on back there. So they give
Tons
us,
of lights.
yeah, they give us this this ultimatum, basically like, we will be back on this date and you will show us our powers being shut off type of deal. And so like now it's a scramble. And so I move everything out, and the same inspector comes out and he looks at it. He goes, "Oh man, I was kind of thinking you're growing wheat back here." And I'm like, "I'm not, dude. You would have smelled it coming in."
Yeah.
And he's laughing. But apparently, in his world and in his job, it's a huge thing, especially out here in California. People are renting up warehouse spaces and just doing indoor grows. I mean, that's a whole other world, but it affected my collection this time and what I was doing.
Reptile keeping or a grow?
Yeah, right.
Where are you?
Oh no, I'm just keeping reptiles.
You have 10,000 watts going on. What
Right.
are you doing?
Right.
I just breed lizards, bro.
Right.
I just breed lizards. That's a good one. It's like it's wintertime and there's that picture of the roof, right? And it's defrosted. That's you right there, man.
Oh no, I'm mining cryptocurrency. That's what I'm doing.
Man, it's like those are things that. And now did that interfere with your electrical at all? Did they ever shut stuff off? Yeah.
They'd never shut things off, which was fortunate for me. But because I had things in bags and totes, I couldn't plug in on the enclosures. Now, fortunately, the weather was pretty mild for everybody across the board. It's like the warehouse was maybe 85 during the day, maybe got a little hotter on a couple days, but usually 90 or below for everything. And then 70 was the coldest it got at night. Not a huge deal across the board. I got very lucky that it happened right now. But yeah, I had one Peacock monitor get out in the process. And when it ran in this little crevice while we're taking out these walk-in enclosures. Now we're talking about walls that are actually like framed between it. The floor is framed out, the walls are framed out, the roof. And it ran behind all this stuff. And there was about a 5-inch circle cut through the cinder block where I have the exhaust for the heating and air and everything. And so it just happens we get to a point where I had blocked that off and stuffed it with something so nothing could get out. But I needed to remove that at this point, and we were pulling a wall out when this Peacock monitor goes darting from one side of the room across this like back cinder block wall, and it's about a foot from this hole, right? And I'm looking at it, plus the two guys that I basically hired. They're friends, but hired to make this all happen like in a day to rip this stuff out of there. It's eyeballing me. I'm eyeballing him. The game is on. And it's about a foot from freedom if it runs out of that hole. And man, it was like, all right, 1, 2, and I go on 2 because I'm superstitious a little bit. I figure he knows I'm counting to 3. So he's gonna get the jump on me. And sometimes I swear monitors do or animals do. So I'm like 1, 2, and I go running. Man, I get this thing by the tail. The front claws are in the hole already, and I have it. It's finally let go, turn around, and got me on the wrist. But that was about the happiest bite I could ever have in life,
Yeah.
And in the process of moving all this stuff out, I did find one of those baby Ackies that got out. So I have a feeling the other one is in the other side of the warehouse, which hasn't been all emptied out yet. So that's, but the other things that did happen was that I did have to move the incubator from one room to the next. Now, when unplugging everything, some of the eggs actually did roll. in the sand monitor eggs, I thought they were in there more secure because they had swelled up between the ridges, basically, of the sim container. So I didn't think it was going to be possible for them to really roll. Surprise! But I don't think that was a big deal. I think as I was going and plugging things back in, this isn't just a simple plug to this incubator. There's a couple parts to it. Um, I didn't plug something in right, and I walked in the next day. The incubator actually, so I plugged it in the morning into the room again, the original room, and so it had to heat up. But when I walked in, it was at 102, and now a couple things happened. I opened the Aki sim containers, and one of them, just one of them, 3 of the eggs popped. One egg popped significantly, where I could actually see the embryo inside. The other one's just almost like little pinhole type of pop.
Yeah.
And the pressure from getting that hot, the humidity inside the enclosure, whatever it was, and I opened that top. So I've taken a couple adjustments from then. I've put little pinhole holes in each of the sim containers on the side. Some of the vented tops that were already had holes in them, there's no issue whatsoever. But the sand monitor eggs, I had 9 cooking in there in this one clutch. And it looks like only 3 are good. The rest, man, right to the heart. But the other sand monitor clutch, for whatever reason, there's not an issue with them at all.
Nice.
Yeah. And as far as the I have three clutches of different Aki eggs in there. Everything looks fine except for the one that popped open wide where I could see the embryo. And those animals should be hatching. Actually, the first one should be hatching in about a week, about 10 days. And then the next one about 15 days. So I'll really get to look at the babies and whatnot. But I have a feeling there's no issues.
Yeah.
So
now, for myself and then other new keepers, when you guys, if this happens to you, because we hear about it quite often, it happens to just about everybody going into breeding dwarf monitors. Not everything is a smooth ride all the time. So if you guys are going and having these issues with your dwarf monitor eggs or even any eggs, right? I guess there's a scale of severity here. The little pinprick holes that he was mentioning about that kind of just ruptured a little bit and oozed out. Okay, freak out, but don't freak out so much. Okay, you have your chance to release some steam a little bit, but what you want to realize is that little fluid that came out, if the hole is small enough, everything else is basically protected. That fluid is actually the protective layer that egg is oozing out currently. Right. And then within a couple of days, that ooze essentially will be hardened up and then create its own cast over that little entry hole. I myself have dealt with that a couple times, maybe 3 different clutches and about maybe 4 different eggs. Where just a little pinprick happened, and so at first I would stress myself out, try to figure out all these things and what to do to basically bandage that little situation, right? I've cut a little piece of saran wrap. I've put Scotch glue on a little piece of paper and put it over the hole. None of that shit really worked. It didn't do anything other than create mess and more rupture, more issue as you're trying to finesse the egg in your hand and do this and that to it. I just started leaving them alone. I stopped even touching them. Stopped removing fluid, basically stopped messing with it.
Yeah.
Jeff Lem told me that really it's all about that little fluid part hardening up, and then the egg will be fine. Now, in the severity case of, I guess I would say level 2 is a slightly bigger puncture. Those I've bandaged with some saran wrap and just pray that the rupture didn't mess with any veins or the yolk or anything like that split that basically makes the animal toast, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like you can see the animal inside or you can see the embryo growing and all that stuff like that, but you kind of want to just leave it at that. So I've had where basically split almost in half, right? And I just set the egg on top of saran wrap and just left it like that. No glue, nothing added, and then the more severity case, like what Alan just mentioned, where the egg just basically ruptured. I've had similar things where a Kimberly egg literally just split the whole thing from the bottom. And it was kind of heartbreaking realizing, damn, that was a really nice looking egg. Why did it do that?
Right.
And so I ended up trying to do that little thing where they, in science class, there's like a video of it on YouTube where they taking a cup and saran wrap and they place the whole embryo and all that stuff like that, the yolk inside this saran wrap thing with this fluid without a shell, because the shell has basically been disrupted and broken. And so they're trying to basically make this thing grow. I don't know if I did it wrong, but basically the thing dehydrated and the animal died in 2 days. But I got to see it like pumping and things like that with just the day or so that it was in this little cup in the incubator.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm just an amateur at that. I don't really know what I'm doing. I just try to see if it'll work or not. But it didn't work. Once the egg split for me, it was just basically toast. And I took that baby and I fed it to the mom so that way we could just recycle and work on the next
thing. Fed it to the mom. That sounds so tragic. You could have fed it to somebody else.
Yeah, man, I gotta put it back into the mom. So, yeah, it's
cutthroat over there.
Right. But it's those things where, man, it's like it's hard to control these things as they happen. We've talked about this before, where incubating issues, and we talked about eggs rupturing and stuff like that, and we've actually just been going through this ourselves to really be able to give you guys this now. All right, this is what we do with the stuff. And before, we're just stressing about it,
right.
Like, damn, what the hell do we do? Like, what causes this? And it's a bit of pressure exchanging too fast, things like that. So basically, pressing onto the container.
Khai helped me out with this because I hadn't really had this issue with eggs yet. But Khai had it, and just the reassurance of, hey, just put them on something like this, and they should close up. And sure enough, except for the one that was obviously, just exploded.
Too severe. Yeah.
The other ones did, but I'm wondering if I see this in the future, if I see these signs in the future, can I, instead of because what I did immediately was I pulled the container out of the incubator. My idea was open the top, let them cool down. And that's when I actually heard the pops, pop, pop, pop. And even the sand monitor eggs will look like really swollen. Right. But I wonder from this point on, if I were to just let them cool down, not move the container, not open the top, but now I also have those pinholes in the containers, and just let the whole thing cool on its own, if it would be more natural without disturbing it, and if it would go back down to that temperature a little slower, have time to pressurize, basically like a diver coming up,
Yeah.
And so different things, because it might happen again, and over the years we'll build this experience, we'll share it with you guys, hopefully you guys will share it with us, your experience, and we can get this information out there so that we can all benefit from it and what's happening. That would be for this podcast, that would be ideal for basically anything we're doing, is sharing the information with you guys sharing it with us. Yeah, that's why we're doing the all the things that have gone wrong episode here.
Now, in like my current incubator, I always, when the temperatures are like right now, they're transitioning, right? I actually have a hard time throughout the transitioning because I feel like, man, these eggs are now kind of maybe catching on to the condensation that's happening within the container, because here in the last week, it's been 70s, just getting to 80s. Next week, again, it's going to go back to 90s. I'm not sure what's up with this weather, but it needs to make up its mind. Because, last year it was extremely late for winter. It was basically hot. And then all of a sudden now we're a lot chillier. And so as the temperatures fluctuate for here, even though I'm glad that it's not hot, It gets really chilly, and then all of a sudden it's hot again. So I would like things to stay more consistent, and it'll be, I think, more beneficial for the eggs. I it's not that where I have the incubator is kind of unstable, but I don't have the incubator in my hot room just because if it got too hot in there, it basically toast everything. So I kind of have it at a slightly cooler temperature where it's more of like higher 70s and there's low 80s in this room rather than being 90s and even sometimes 100 degrees in that room if it's like uncontrolled, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So those are issues that are going to add to eggs rupturing. So if you guys want to nip this in the bud, really pay attention to the temperatures within your room, the incubator, and then also within the moisture levels within the containers and the incubator itself too. You know, if you guys are making your homemade ones, not the things that aren't always explained to you is that whole pressure release hole, and that's the one in the back or the holes that you've drilled within making your thing. And as you close your incubator as well, let's say if you just happen to slam it close, that pressure will change as well, and so it'll just boop,
right,
pops up or you know something like that, and that hole in the back, or in my case, yeah, my in my hot box there is a hole that you lead the thermostat probe through, and that is my pressure exchange hole
right,
inside my actual incubator. So you guys making your stuff at home, although we do recommend that, and it is one of the probably better incubators, just so you know you put all your work into it, you know how it runs. Don't forget that hole. And it's just a simple, it can be, you know, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch pilot hole run through the back, and that's it.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
And so you're going to account for your See, this some of the issues I have with the incubators that are out there today is I think they need to have thicker walls. Yeah, more insulation. And this, I mean, you can adjust around it as we've been doing, but thicker insulation and more. It's a good idea to use up the volume as long as you're not affecting what you're actually incubating. Use up the volume in there with things like water bottles. Even this is going to sound silly, but like a brick will reach a certain temperature and it'll hold that temperature once it's in the incubator. And when you use up the volume and everything can kind of hold that temperature in there, it's going to make it much more stable. So you're going to have to not only have something that will allow the exchange of pressure, but also you don't want it so flimsy or so much exchange that it can't hold its temperatures either. My dog's barking over here. So
I'm gonna eat that dog. Yeah. So as far as like your the, your pressure and what he just mentioned, as far as thicker walls and such like that maybe new gen incubators can incorporate. I myself have had to do that in a rigging way where I've had to take the thick, I would say 1 inch purple foam that they sell at Home Depot. It's a much more firmer board. It's not thin or it's not flimsy. It doesn't break off in small white pieces. It's that pink one, pink and purple one. And I have those on the very front wall and the wall that catches the most draft. And essentially, I basically double plied my incubator on the glass. So I have to actually lift or move this thing up. And so the glass is now without ability to have cold drafts just hit it, right? It's, the viewing glass, I mean, and then the sidewall that gets the draft is now a whole inch thicker, and so basically the cold air just flows by it rather than hitting that wall. And actually, it's actually helped quite a bit because this normal draft would come through the door and then come through my room, and that entry area is kind of where the incubator is in my room, and so before, let's say in the morning time, if it's 4 to 6 a.m., it's typically the coldest part of the morning, and that's where I still have the door open, and it's just breathing and stuff like that without trapping in air and smells, and so the draft will come in, and it was affecting my stuff before until I put that board up. And it's just, you just got work with what you got, and try to rig it if you could. If not, build your own or try to work out a better one. Now, the ones that you build your own, typically the foam or the thick walls within that refrigerator are quite thick, sometimes an inch or 2, and that's what you want, because it basically is an encased shell that is like an igloo or just so thick,
Right. Man, I got all these crazy ideas, but to build my ideal incubator in my head would just take a lot of room, a lot of space, and
Man, I mean, to be honest, it's okay if you took the hot box idea,
uh-huh.
right? Because it's a nice one, and just made it out of thick plywood. I seen Rob Fost, the famous white throat, or he actually works with a lot of African monitors, Niles and Ornatus as well. And his wooden incubator is like goals. I love it. It looks exactly like the hot box, but made out of wood.
Yeah,
and it's thicker. It looks exactly the same. The ledges, the level, everything. And so, really, going with that, he's like, I just built mine. I'm like, damn, I wish I had those skills.
right.
I'm just over here looking on Craigslist and Marketplace and trying to find, because I myself, even though I have my incubator here, it's like the mad scientist in me. I just want to see what else is going to work for me. Maybe
Right.
I'll have a better thing, because the only reason why I have this hot box is because my previous incubator, the front glass cracked as I was traveling from SoCal to SoCal from NorCal. So that 8-hour drive, it basically took a little nick and it cracked it.
Oh
And I
man.
was actually running with that for a whole year before I got a new incubator. And then I had to really test out this incubator from ground zero with knowledge and experience with it. And I've actually failed a little bit, losing some Kimberly clutches and other things like that. But we're moving forward,
Right.
trying to, yeah.
I guess if I can make one suggestion, if anybody's out there listening, that builds these things with the glass or acrylic front doors, make them like especially with acrylic, clear plexiglass, make it double walled if you could. So have the one pane that you obviously everybody uses and can look through, and then leave a little gap and put another one. That's going to help trap the air in there. To a certain, it's might be a little difficult making it dust free. Always in there. You'd have to seal it up so nothing gets inside, but it's there. You're then going to have that little bit of protection rather than just that. I don't know what it usually is, 3/16 maybe acrylic, so that the outside temperatures can directly influence or have more influence on the stuff in the incubator. If you made it double walled, then you would have a lot more protection. We always like to look in and see our stuff. I mean, they're just eggs. If you really think about it, they're eggs incubating. They're not supposed to be out in the open where someone can view them. That's not very safe. A lot of species would die off if that was the case. But we do this. That's for humans. All right. That's not natural for them. That's for us humans, because we like to worry about things we really don't have control over anyway, except the little dial as far as the temperature. But
Yeah.
The other idea would just be, if you already have those, is to take a piece of styrofoam like Khai has, and just almost, you could even duct tape a hinge, basically.
Yeah.
Cut that, run it, and have another piece of duct tape that sticks to it and replace it when it runs out of stickiness. And just that way you could actually close off the front. And when you want to peek in, just undo your duct tape, look in real quick, make sure there's still eggs, because we all like to do it.
Yeah, that's basically what I do. I have to freaking lift this thing up, and just to, like, I'm literally, me in a little fort or something like that with this
Yeah.
foam that's above my head. And I got this. Luckily, there's this light that I can flip the switch on and then easily peer in. But yeah, man, it's I basically build a little fortress around my incubator. My next one. Now, I haven't used this yet. I've only looked in the size. But what I was thinking about was encasing my incubator inside a grow tent to trap and keep the pressure and the temperature all very consistent, just surrounding the incubator. So it can breathe a little bit, maybe have a little space hole in there, but for the most part, the It'll be an incubator sitting inside a tent, and then that whole thing, because in wintertime here, it gets so cold, the pressure drops a lot,
Right.
the amount of humidity drops, the overall temperature kind of messes with things a little bit. And what that does is, I mean, we've explained this before, but the condensation that happens within the containers a lot of times happens when the actual incubator is a lot warmer than the room that it's in. And so the incubator is running at mid 80s, but the the room is maybe only 60s and 70s. And so that the temperature fluctuation there basically causes the condensation to happen within your containers, and that's what we think is causing some people to have eggs drown because they basically are so damp and so wet within that.
Right.
And so um, just something to consider and something to think about if you guys are reaching that stage of producing eggs but not hatching babies, because this is the stuff that you run into.
Oh, that's another thing. I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast yet, but my clutch of peacock monitors, I think I did mention it, but I had 3 eggs. It was a small clutch, but all of them died. And I had animals that basically went full term.
Full
And
term.
but then when I opened up the eggs, they had significant kinks in the tails, and I don't think it's a genetic issue. These things are wild caught animals originally, the parents. What I think is, and I've talked to Khai about it, is that the Indonesian stuff actually like a lower incubating temperature. So I have
Yeah.
another incubator that's set up now for basically colibrid eggs and Indonesian stuff. It's going to be right in that
Yeah.
low 80 range, if not 80
For
degrees.
for me, I've tested quite a few temperatures with my Indo stuff. But I guess dating back a little bit, even before I was breeding monitor lizards, I was actually working with chameleons. And so the chameleon, most species, except for the live bearer ones, the ones that lay eggs, sometimes those eggs are like 9 months. Parsoni, even though I wasn't breeding parsoni, um, that's like a year and a half, 2 year wait.
Yeah.
18, 20 something months. And so what I had to consider was that those eggs, and the person that was mentoring me at the time was explaining, these eggs start off at 77, 78 degrees, and then they go up every few months by a few degrees, because that's how it'll gradually go for them, and as the weather changes. Now, I took almost the same concept as what this person, and her name was Susan James, was doing with her chameleons, and I applied it to how I was hatching, or started to learn how to hatch mangrove monitors. I had eggs prior to that basically go mold up and immediately go bad or something like that. And maybe those were meant to go bad, but I then started incubating at only 81 and 80 degrees, and the eggs would actually stick around more. And then I actually had an egg that was parthenogenic basically go full term, and that's who I have now as Jody. But Jody started off incubation at 80 degrees, and then went up every couple months a couple degrees, and then once it got to finally like the 6th and 7th month, I was back up to roughly 83, 84, almost 85 degrees. You get what I'm saying? And so um, that's my max for Indo species, or for what I work with. I basically stick right around 84.5. That's my even though my thing is set to right around 85, the incubator inside sits at that temperature roughly. And so that's where I feel comfortable. Where there's a couple things here. He also mentioned kinks, right? Basically, what I'm trying to avoid: unhealthy babies, kinks, deformities, just premature shooting out. All these things happen. It's just from eggs possibly either being too hot, temperature spikes, or whatever. And so for me, that low 80 mark has been more beneficial in my babies and in the results that I'm wanting, which is basically pristine looking animals. I don't have to worry about selling an animal that's busted to a customer, or going the distance, but then ending up with something like this that I can't sell, essentially, and so I avoid those high temperatures, so that way I have bigger babies. They may take a little bit longer to incubate, but I'm okay with that,
Right.
because the end result is what I want, and so I'm not rushing eggs out now. Some snake and python breeders, and maybe some of you guys are listening to this where you're transitioning from snakes to lizards. People incubate python eggs quite high,
Mm-hmm.
87, 88. I've even seen people incubate them in 90 degrees. And it's not that I'm disagreeing with that. It's just you can't really do that with monitor lizards like that. And so it's just you end up with many more issues. And so also the time frame that takes to hatch compared to these snakes and these lizards, you're essentially adding on another 6-7 months for the monitor lizard sometimes, because most of these snakes are hatching out, what, 2.5 months, bro? Right? Most of these
Yeah.
python eggs and coily
Yeah.
bird eggs, 2 to 3 months, right? So these monitors, I'm already sitting at 180 something days right now on one of my mangrove clutches for this year. And so we're already past a few months already, and
Right.
I don't even know when it's going to hatch. So you want the process to be slow and steady, not rushed.
Right.
And that'll be my best recommendation for guys that are getting into species like this, and you're having troubles with eggs or something. The ones that aren't having trouble, great, great on you. Continue what you're doing and just keep on rocking. But the ones that are having issues, you'll have to adjust a little bit. Go lower, start cooler, things like
Right.
that.
I don't think you'll go wrong with going a little bit lower with almost any species that's recommended, but
Yeah.
going higher, there's no way to rush some of these things, not without walking that line of causing
Yeah.
defects.
Too bad, right?
Right.
Right. You want to find out what that fine line is, and for me, it's 84 degrees. Anything 86 and above, it makes the monitors shoot out too fast. Now, don't get me wrong, people do it. People to this day are still incubating at that temperature.
Yeah.
Mostly the Aussie stuff can be incubated at that temperature, but
Yeah, I do most of my
these other
stuff
things,
at 86, 87 degrees for the Aussie stuff. So now, like my pythons I had in the same incubator, they usually take about 10 to 14 days longer than what's usual for incubating those same type of python eggs. But it's because I'm running the monitors a little bit cooler, or that about 86 degrees. So instead of, I guess, 88 degrees or whatnot. So there's a little longer cooking time. But I know that now, especially after this year, I can account for that. And it's fine with me. I want things to come out healthy. And I'm
yeah,
going to experiment in the future with some other temps to see if babies come out just bigger. I really haven't had unhealthy babies, but maybe they come out bigger. I don't know.
bigger.
Um,
Yeah, I've had Kimberly eggs. Now the eggs are the same, but and I'm not sure if it was my temperatures or not. It could just be maybe what the parents are, or maybe these are just runts or smaller. But I've had Kimberly's come out really tiny, like tiny,
yeah.
and then I've had Kimberly's come out almost double the size. And it's like, man, I'm not sure. The eggs are the same. It's so even then, right now we're talking about temperatures. Most of mine are quite the same for the past however long I've been doing Kimberly's, and not very long. It's literally my first real season. So, um, 1 year, right? And so nothing has really changed within that 1 year. It's still been quite the same of 84 degrees. So I haven't been changing the temperatures too much or lowering them at all. It's just now 84 degrees. So yeah, I wonder what causes that too, because this when we're assuming that lower temperatures would make healthier, bigger babies. I've had some where, dang, it's like this is where it throws a wrench in your process of learning, and what's factual and what's not. It's like, all right, here's a thing that's on a tangent on its own. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's just more complicated than we think, maybe. Yeah.
Man. So, what are some of the other things that have, I mean, I'm probably forgetting some of the things that go bad.
Because there's so many things that go bad. There's so many things that are like, oh, that happened.
Yeah.
Damn.
It
And then we just have to move on. Just like,
there are I've talked about my Kimberly female experience. So I did lose a Kimberly. 7 babies. I killed 3 of them somehow. I still don't know exactly what I did.
yeah.
But I did
I
kill
have a
3 of them.
$15,000 Ziploc bag full of dead kittens. Literally, there's like
So
15
expensive.
babies in there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so expensive. I just look at the bag and the inside of myself. It's like you're hatching Kimberleys now, which is great.
Right.
But damn, look at what you went through. And I open my freezer and I see this bag. I'm just like, well, it's just like rolled up, you know, in the thing. And I see like hint zebra tails, a bunch of the little zebra tails
Yeah.
that are all frozen. And I was like, these things came out perfect, but dead.
Right.
And you know, with this, because you know, we talked about this, I think 20 episodes ago. Yeah, we thank you guys for tuning in for this many episodes as well. But you know, with my previous season of failing with my Kimberleys as my learning curve area, um, these things went the distance.
Mm-hmm.
They went the whole 100 days, 100 plus days. But once it's 100 something days, I then start to like think, all right, at 120, 30 days, you're probably gonna die.
Yeah.
So within 100 and 115 days, I'm expecting the thing to hatch. So anything past that, I'm like, all right, this is nail biting. Hurry up, you know,
Right.
hurry up. But these eggs started to then indent in the bottom at 100 something days or something like that, right? And I basically was venting them way too much. I started at 70 because other keepers at the time were like, hey, in the last leg, the last month or so, the last few weeks, take the time and vent the eggs a little bit. So I started to do that, and then I started to do it more, and I thought I was doing the trick until that very, very last 2 weeks, the eggs were indented from the bottom. And when they indent from the bottom, a lot of times it's hard to save those eggs. And I tried my best. I tried to put stuff at the bottom, water droplets on the grid, so it can literally soak up that water, wet paper towels, spraying the eggs a little bit, and none of that stuff worked because they were done. They were toast. They were still alive, slowly dwindling. Every day one would die. The egg would just go dark.
Man.
So I'm like, all right, fuck, let me just cut this.
Right.
The next egg would go dark. I'd cut it, and there would be all these fully formed babies, and I'm just frustrated at 2 a.m, crying a little bit, you know, just like, all right, what am I doing wrong? You know?
Right.
We're not always gonna get it right. And even if me and Alan are painting this picture and giving you all the steps and giving you what to do, you'll still run into this, you know. Maybe now it's just more evident and you'll actually have it in the back of your mind and it'll click for you.
I do know that there are a few people that have reached out and said that some of the information we've shared have given them ideas or helped them where they weren't having some success hatching eggs, and now they are, and that's great to hear. And hopefully, you know, we're always looking into stuff. If you guys have little tricks that you've used, if you're hearing something, you're like, oh, I know what to do for that, and it doesn't matter if it's in monitor eggs or something else, you know. There's people that are like Khai mentioned, the chameleon world. We can take things and learn things from all over.
Yeah.
So definitely,
we've actually adopted stuff lately from the chameleon people themselves. It's because of, all right, not to, you know, put anybody on top of anybody else, but chameleon people are freaking crazy about their setups. You know, it's everything, the lighting,
right.
The reason why we know UV so well is because of chameleon people and because of how they essentially are so delicate to the light that we have to utilize this expensive lighting. UV and all that stuff like that is not cheap, and it's gotten better. The bulbs have gotten better over the years. Not to say that chameleon people are the only people that are testing them out. It's just they put so much into it. And monitor keepers, it's like, all right, if they have D3 in their diet, they're fine. You know, it's like
Yeah.
now we're trying to utilize UV as well and proper lighting for Australian species to Indonesian jungle species to African species, and so across the board, nothing is the same. And so we want to take as much as we can from them utilizing that lighting and apply it to what we're doing, because we also have voracious diurnal lizards that are chasing the sun, and we know they chase the sun. So for us to essentially neglect them or keep them of UV usage, and this might be something that we're doing wrong here. On another thing where we're taking from another part of the chameleon hobby is the lighting. Again, with the floodlights and the BR30s and BR40s. Okay, now we're all used to par 38s. That's what most monitor keepers are using, because the ample amount of light that the actual floodlights produce for our monitors is really great, compared to a 150-watt basking bulb. That's a zoom ed bulb. That bulb, although they are great with heating and their usage, the actual light focus is too strong and can cause burns. So we don't really use those. We use those par 38s more because it spreads out the heat a little bit more broadly and limiting the risk of burns. Now we've gone through even more than that, and now using these BR30s and BR40s, BR20s as well, which is just a smaller version of the bulbs. These bulbs do not burn your monitors at all. You can grab these bulbs and hang on to them for a minute or so, and it won't even burn your hand. And they are a lot weaker, but it's meant for smaller enclosures, shorter enclosures, or more so what I'm using them for is it makes me utilize a very small basking spot while the rest of the enclosure is cool.
Yeah.
Because that's what monitors like. They don't hang out like what Frank Reed says. They don't hang out in the sun and chasing the sun 24/7 while they're basking. It's 5-10 minutes,
right,
30 minutes, very very quick, in and out. You know, maybe get some food, go back, do it again. You're living like little gremlins. That's what monitors are. They're basically living, hiding, being very secretive, coming out, doing their thing, going back, coming out, doing their thing, coming back. It's never just blasted all out in the sun.
Right. You know, it's funny you mentioned some stuff. I do a lot of experimenting with things that I don't really put out there because there's no scientific way for me to like even explain some of the stuff. I just look at the animals and try to test things out. So the Australian stuff, like my Ackies across the board, if the ambient in their cage is 90 degrees, they're loving life. They could care less almost. They're just running around having a good time. If I did that to like the Timors or the peacocks, they're unhappy. They're like crammed into the coolest corner of their cage. And, you know, but at the same time, if I just turn the lights off and leave them all at room temperature, the Ackies,
they're out.
Well, no, the Ackies actually stop moving so much. And the Timors and the peacocks, yeah, they're still active like it's a regular day for them. Just funny things that I've been able to notice as far as temperatures and lighting. I did want to mention some of you guys might have things set up differently. Maybe it's the constraints of my size enclosures and what I'm doing. But Khai mentions some of the bulbs. I've been testing out and messing with some of the like all-in-one heat and UV bulbs just to see what they would do. And I'm still. Oh, we got something going on. Okay.
Oh, no.
But I found the same thing that it's hard to explain it because I'm still learning about the lighting and everything. So I'm still a huge skeptic on things like I have to prove it to myself before I use anything. So those all-in-one bulbs though, it's like the recommended space between where you're supposed to have the bulb as far as for the UV purposes, so you're not like oversaturating the animal basically, they weren't allowing the cages to heat up or the hotspot to heat up to the right temperature.
Yeah, they don't at all. The actual the beam of light and how it's supposed to focus. If you're looking at a 100-watt bulb, you're expecting that surface temperature at only 10 inches to be 130, 140
Right.
easy, when a 30-watt floodlight can do that
Right.
like that.
So
Yeah.
with I'm still messing around with UVB and different things, but I will say this, that I would be a lot more comfortable using a 2-part system than getting those all-in-one bulbs for monitors. For other animals that can bask at like 95 degrees, 100 degrees, maybe they work fine for that, but I haven't been able to set it up in a way on 2-foot tall enclosures, 3-foot tall enclosures, or 6-foot tall enclosures where I can achieve what I'm looking for. So that's just, maybe you guys, somebody out there is doing it different. Maybe you're achieving something different, but I just don't trust the all-in-one bulbs. If I was going that route, I would rather use a 2-part system.
Yeah, same here. For a quick Kimberly cage, a small one, sure, I'm using the 70-watt Mega Ray.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like now, as I'm transitioning into the weather, I actually didn't crank the heat up at all in that cage. I took that 70-watt bulb and I just put a little 45-watt Duramax floodlight in there. That's a BR30, right? And so the distance between that has to be roughly about 6 inches for it to even get a decent surface temperature.
Right.
6 inches is not much space, you guys. Okay, the recommended normal space for a floodlight is about a foot, because that's how strong some of them can be. But these BR30s, when you're looking at the lumens, it gives you the strength of the bulb. Okay, the lumens would be on the bottom right, or typically on the back of the bulb, and most people don't pay attention to this. But if you look at, all bulbs would basically give you the number of lumens at the bottom. These BR30s are only like 300, 350, 400 lumens. So the distance is not so much. But let's say if a 65-watt floodlight had 1500 lumens, man, that's a very strong bulb, even if it was just a 65-watt bulb. Now, let's say if it was a 65-watt bulb, floodlight, same thing, but not 1500 lumens and only 560. Okay, that's a very typical lumens for that type of bulb. And the distance you only really need about 10 inches, maybe a foot. But if it was like 1500 lumens, you would need maybe 2 to 3 foot of distance, because that's how strong the bulb is. You guys, if you are interested, you'd be able to buy these bulbs yourself, because I really recommend you just go through them. Even the incandescent egg-shaped bulbs are beneficial to what we use if you utilize them in the right way. But these what I'm using here, I went from hot blistering bulbs, hot setups, to cooler setups, slightly cooler. Don't get me wrong, I'm still using 120 surface temperatures, 130 maybe, but not 150. And my ambience are still now back to sitting at like 80s, rather than having much of the cage go to 90s. I'm trying my best to not have things basically overheat when it's wintertime. Summertime, and when they go into winter, it's going to be hard to overheat them, because I'll be fighting with the winter. So it'd be perfect for me if I'm adding a lot of heat then. But now it's like learning new things. I just cranked down a bunch of my heat. I had like 245 watts in a 4x4, and I turned off one of them. Female came out, male started locking with her. It's like they're just, you would think the normal recommendation would just be heat them and feed them for all the monitors, but mine like it cooler.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because where I'm at, it's so hot already that this is their chance, and they love it cooler because they don't get it a lot. So I'm not 100% sure. It's just like now, as I'm noticing and I'm adjusting my bulbs, they love it. They love it where it's not so blistering.
I'm coming up
with the norm is hot.
I'm coming up with ideas that ideas that I've had kind of floating around about how to utilize them better. Jeff Easter just made a post about how he's using those DHPs, the deep heat projectors, and it's an idea I've wanted to kind of mess with as well. Just so you guys know, there's a ton of things that I I'm always tinkering with something. Like I have some crazy looking bulbs and setups. In fact, oh wait, I took it. Kai, I'll send you a picture of one that I got recently. I think it's made in China somewhere. I've never seen anything like it. Yes, it works, but I'm not sure I would ever use it. It's this crazy heating element type of thing. But I'm always looking for ideas to do things better. And Jeff has showed a picture basically where he's using this DHP in conjunction with a halogen for the daylight, and I think a strip for the UVB, like one of the T5s or
Yeah.
something.
Right.
And I really like it. It looks like he's achieving the temperatures he wants, because when you have that DHP, from what I understand, it heats kind of the items in the cage a little better. It's not really heating the air; it heats the items the way it works. Um, so putting like a stone under there, a slab or something, maybe some other things like that in and around it, it's going to help keep that temperature, especially
Yeah.
at nighttime. And then the halogen is just going to bump those temperatures up, get you that really nice daytime basking. And then to go further with that, there's the UVV strip. What this also allows you to do is kind of control these things independently. So there's actually, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but there's I think it's a podcast and a YouTube channel. It just had uh, Dr. Francis Baines on, who does a huge amount with reptiles and UV lighting, but and more than UV lighting across the board, like the full spectrum. Um, it just came out a few days ago. It's actually really, really interesting. Um, what she's talking about. I'm going to try to look it up here so that I can recommend it to everybody. Because it gets your head going and how to use light, but there's a lot of cases where you don't want if you use UVB or UV light, you don't want it across the whole cage. You don't want to always have to expose your animal to it. You don't want it mixed in with the heating element per se, because then they're forced to receive that kind of radiation while just trying to heat up. And regardless of what people say, it isn't the cure all end all to things. It has to be used appropriately, or you could have some possible negative effects. But I think the best thing with all of this is letting your animal choose what it wants. And so they go into talking about how to set up an enclosure that allows this, and your lighting that allows the animal to choose from the different parts that you allow it to. Let me see if I can
Yeah.
find.
My guys, my monitors, because I have most of my UV settings either spread out throughout most of the enclosure, right? Like long UV tubes. Um, the usage of those for me is a lot better, as the animal wants to hang out underneath the lamp of UV, but she doesn't always want to bask, or they don't always want to bask underneath the hot temperature. So I'll notice them just sit underneath that independent UV light rather than going and hanging out underneath like a mercury vapor bulb. Now, for me, the mercury, I've been testing a few things, and I've actually used the deep heat projector,
Mm-hmm.
and I still currently use a couple of the mega rays, but I honestly don't like them and what I need to use them for, because of the flexibility that I want to have with what Alan was mentioning. Basically, I like to be able to use my heat and UV and even night heat source all independently,
Right.
not having to be on at all at the same time. So for me, my usage in the deep heat projector, it can be for nighttime heat, or let's say the UV bulb that's creating white visual light. I'll have just the deep heat projector on, and that's just on 24/7, running all the time. And for me though, okay, the deep heat projector that I got was only like a 70 watt roughly, right? That one came from the same mega ray company, which is reptileuv.com. I got those for a pretty cheap price. They're like 30 bucks or so, give or take. Their ability and everything like that, and strength, oh my god, it's very strong. Very strong. Even at 2.5, 3 feet distance, the cage is only 3 feet tall, and the lamps are at the very top of the cage. I was getting a surface temperature at the very bottom of the cage easily 130, 140. Now this is 170-watt DP projector. Now you may have bigger cages or taller cages, but make sure that you're running these DP projectors and basically getting their surface temperatures down before you're plugging in your animal. Don't just assume that it'll work a certain way just because we're saying it will. See how it affects your current space for your animal. That whole distance between the bulb and the basking area is very important. Now, let's say for some species with really thick scales, maybe not so bad because it's hard to get burns. But for my animals that have very thin skin, burning is very easy. And I have Kimberleys and Mangroves, basically very very thin skinned monitors. It's not rough and plated or they're not bumpy and ridged or anything like that. It's actually quite smooth, just like skin. And so for me, I have to really play it safe, and I ended up not utilizing the DP projector because it was quite strong for my short cages. I still have them sitting there, and I'm
down,
waiting
guys.
for.
Send them down.
Yeah, I'll send them down. I'll send them to you because my lady was like, "What are you gonna freaking do with all these bulbs? You bought these, and you're not even using them." And I'm just like, they're just sitting there because she helps me tidy up, and she's like, these bulbs are just sitting here, and you spent like $200 on them, and you're not even really using them anymore because I needed the freedom, and
Yeah.
so having all different bulbs hooked up to all different things and in combination make the usage just like a mercury vapor, but all independent. It works better for me freely. Now, some of you might love the mercury vapor because it's simple, and then you just have another nighttime heat source. Don't get me wrong. Stick with what you're doing, with what you like, and how it works for you. But for me, it just doesn't work that well.
Yeah.
And same thing with the mercury vapors. Just because the mega rays for me, even at 70-watt, get too hot, and I'm expecting a hotter surface temperature, and they just don't give it to me at the distance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this so it's the Animals at Home podcast or / YouTube show. It came out 3 days ago. It has an interview with Dr. Francis Bain. So go check it out. We don't have any affiliation with that show. But go look at the information. I've never talked to the host, anything like that. I've had a couple quick conversations through message with Dr. Baines, but it's awesome information, and a lot of the questions I had about things kind of got answered. It led to a lot more questions, if I'm being honest. But
so many numbers.
Yeah.
Make sure you're ready to pile in numbers.
Right. But I've been so curious about this stuff, and she treats lighting as like this holistic like a full range approach. So it's not just, and we get these camps of just UVB, now kind of UVA, heat, and that's it. Where her approach is like, well, actually, we're seeing this whole range. How do we provide them all of this in captivity and the choices to use what they need when they want to use it? And so I really like that idea and that approach to things. Also with the kind of technology that's out there today, where you can, when you can see the basically chart of the different light waves and what natural sun looks like, and then what you can hit with different bulbs and how they overlap, you can see it for yourself and be like, oh wow, that's really cool. This is how it
makes more sense.
Right.
And then when your animals, ultimately how your animal responds is going to show you how these things are working.
Exactly.
Yeah. For me, seeing them utilize, like when I have my compact bulb just hooked up normally like vertical, right? But when this hooked up horizontally, they respond differently because that bulb is working better.
Huh.
Now that because I still have a couple of those small compacts running, and I stopped utilizing them straight down because they don't work that way. They work at a horizontal where the thing is the length of the bulb is facing downwards, and then it projects a little bit better UV. Then again, I still don't utilize a ton of those. I just only have them just for testing, you know.
Yeah.
And still to today, I go back and forth between utilizing some UVB and not utilizing any, and I get results from both. So, but I've had some issues where female Kimberleys didn't bounce back very well, and nearly losing those, right? But UV really helps me out then. Um, so you know, I'm not gonna knock out. I'm not gonna knock and say it is beneficial or it's not. I've actually been using them off and on, and um, you know, getting similar results. So
You know what's funny for me? It's like I want to. I almost think I want to believe in it fully, but there's so much bad information out there. It's like the people with the bad information really make it
yeah,
hard for me. It's like get out of the way and stop giving out bad information, so I can
yeah,
actually
yeah,
listen to the people that are giving. Because you know, be ready to say like, okay, yeah, why is it beneficial? And you hear these, you know, crazy stories sometimes. Not to say Kai, yours aren't like, because we talk about what you're really seeing, what you're doing. You have a better way to explain it. But you know, or people just get in camps and they want to fight online, and you're like,
yeah,
this doesn't
man.
help anybody. Like, I'm really trying to
Right.
figure this out.
And you know, there's a million people online or more, and so there's a million opinions.
Right,
Sadly, it's a lot to weave out.
right,
So I would not listen to just anybody. I would go through people are available. If they are actually out there posting quite regularly, and some of it, what you want to do is don't just take what they take their word for it. Don't just take my word for it or Alan's word for it. Just listen to what we got to say, maybe, but test it.
right.
See if it works. See if it works for your animals. See if what your application is doing is now beneficial and it's got some change going on. Don't just take what we say and run with it or spread it. You want to make sure that you know the ins and outs of what you're telling people. Okay. At the same time, when you're going and you're hopefully being politeful, talking to these people, basically picking their brain, you know, seeing these successful people, you will see them. They're evident. They have the animals breeding. They are, you know, recommended by people. You'll see their work. When you just search their names up in groups, you see just followings and followings and followings of just them posting. Test all of that shit.
Yeah,
Look all that stuff up. Make sure that you're not just taking what they're saying and repeating that and regurgitating that, but you've gone through it, you know, and seeing how that works for yourself. And these people are quite easy to follow, you know, just message them online or add them online, and you know, be nice about how your approach is, you know, have some manners, because some of these people are, you know, their work and volumes and stuff like that, they just want to have a normal conversation with people, just continues, you know. And so your approach is everything on how you want to gather information from these people, and is that respective manners is that main ingredient there, you
mm-hmm.
know. And there's, for myself, you know, to Alan and to very like people at the top or whatever, we're all always learning from each other. um it's like a thing where all of us somewhat are communicating with each other all the time, and it's like a collective, you know. And something that you may find difficult to understand, we may have already gone through that. You just kind of have to really reach out and see
Yeah.
who is good with you with communication and all that stuff like that, you know.
Yep. It, we got away from talking about the bad into UV, and now talking to
Yeah,
different people and gaining ideas.
it's still you know, all kind of relative, because these
Absolutely.
people are going to come to us, and or they'll come to somebody, and you know, right now I think a lot of what it is people are gravitating to this podcast a lot. Now it's not just this podcast, but people are gravitating to this, to podcast period, over certain other things because of the rawness in
Mm-hmm.
podcast, or the just the conversations, they're real, you know. And we'll get more and more people that are essentially curious, right? They're essentially want to do better with their animals,
Absolutely.
do better for themselves, reach goals, right? And you guys will basically be, again, faced with a million opinions, a million answers, and we're trying to weave out what's right. And you may have a couple of different options that someone is giving you, and you're gonna want to, before you get to the horror parts that we've mentioned at the beginning of this, maybe you can nip those things in the butt.
Man, I got to talk to you after the show about those deep heat projectors. But before we get into all that,
Yeah,
what
I'll send them to you, man. I don't want them.
Tell me, what is going right for you right now? We talked about some of the bad. What is going right?
Nothing, man. Nothing. I'm just kidding. All right, so not to really jump the gun on anything. Basically, most of my Kai Island stuff is on the up and up, even if it's very, very slow growth. Things are locking, things aren't killing each other as much.
Nice.
My caging is better. Basically, I've made sure every single nest bin is like on point, 84 degrees, the soil temperatures, the saturation and moisture levels. I no longer use just soil or partly sandy soil. I use 80% sand now with some soil, twigs, and leaf litter. But the saturation level is like a beach.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's going back to the conversation we had just a week or two ago about just the soil in Asia or the soil and mostly anywhere. It's not just dirt. It's got a lot of sand in it. It's kind of soot, like, when you pick it up. And so that's what I'm trying to apply, is seeing if my monitors respond to it better, which their scales are, their overall liking and digging it and probing it rather than just sitting on it. When it was just mostly wet dirt, they weren't utilizing it like how they are now. So that's on the up and up with the Kai Island stuff. I've got Solomon Island Indicus kind of always cranking out. Those are kind of like my pride and joys on why I do the mangroves. It's basically my Partho project that's grown and grown and grown. I'm now creating F3s of these monitored lizards that are Solomon Island mangroves. So I'm now on F3. Going back a little bit, prior to this, I was still getting parthenogenic clutches and only partial fertile clutches. So I was still getting 1 or 2 eggs that were the female bred or not, right? And then I was getting like half clutches where only 3 or 4 eggs out of 6 or 7 would be great. But now I'm getting better clutches, full, all the eggs are essentially looking great. And that's because I've been cooling my mangroves down. So they actually go through a chill period in the wintertime. I'm not fighting my winter like I used to.
Yeah.
Now the Kimberly stuff. All right, so the Kimberly stuff is actually doing amazing this year so far. I've basically, saved enough for a wedding ring, basically.
Woo-hoo.
Type money. I mean, even though we're going to be investing that money in a smarter stuff, we already talked about.
Oh, what are you saying?
Like that. But she's like, yeah, she's like, yo, I don't think I want a ring. We could just spend that on like our property or something like that, So yeah, man, my wife's a trooper. She's great for that stuff. I was like, all right, dang, I don't gotta buy a ring. But yeah, it's
Khai,
like the Kimberly.
Look behind you.
Yeah,
no, we're kidding.
the Kimberly stuff is I think I'm on like my 6th clutch right now of this year.
Nice.
And so yeah, everything has been pretty decent. I'm actually going into this year, so we're September, October now, right? Or we're getting into October soon. I've had to remember what I did last year.
Yeah.
I have the notes still, but last year was good.
Yeah.
But this year I want to make even better. So I want to see if my Kai Island stuff will respond to some of the changes that I've made. I don't want to just sit stagnant with stuff like, oh, they're not breeding,
Yeah.
throw in the towel or something like that. I haven't. I'm not done yet with them and all that stuff like that. There is quite a bit of the project now as well. It's no longer just trying to make pure Kai Islands, which is the main goal. I have 75 percenters on the way, which is 50% Kai Island produced with a full Kai Island female. So that'll make me 75 percenters. And then if I can take this hatchlings from the 75 percenters and then utilize that one and produce that one with another full blooded Kai Island, then I would in terms make 100 percenters. But that's 5 years down the line or something like that after I grow up everything and try to put it back together. But right now I have pure pairs, I have mutt pairs, I have all sorts of things kind of going on. And yeah, man, it's for the monitor side, that's where I'm at. I have some other loose odds and ends, but I'm actually going to be figuring out what I'm going to be doing with all that shortly. So
yeah, I heard you acquired something new recently. I mean, a really, really pretty snake. I think it was.
Yeah, man, I was actually joking about the snake when you first sent them. I was like, why the fuck are all these snakes in this box? How come there's no monitor? How come there's no monitor lizards in here? And I fell in love with that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was literally a joke. I was kind of talking shit on the snake a little bit, like we're a monitor table, but we got a ton of pythons, and so let's just run with this. But centrillions have been a thing that I liked when I was younger.
Right.
A gentleman friend of mine, when I was a kid, like literally 12, 13, he bought one and then kind of brought it into the store a lot. He kind of took care of it like too anal, like everything needed to be somewhat perfect. Man, this snake just sits at 80 degrees on the top of my shelf, and I just feed it. It ate an adult mouse the other day, and I was like, wow, all right, cool.
Yeah.
It's night and day for me because I'm used to getting shitted on and scratched up, and my monitors are somewhat annoying because they're like all over me, right?
Right.
But the snake is somewhat of a good thing because I'm just, I don't have to worry about it biting me or pissing on me, and I don't have to shower right away so man, the snake is great though.
Yeah,
I love it. I really appreciate it, man.
Oh, my pleasure, man. They are my favorite python. So and you're right, they're kind of bulletproof. They can sit at, like you said, like 80 degrees on a warm shelf somewhere and probably be fine. And you know what, if it got 50 degrees in your house, it would probably be fine. I actually cool them down to like mid 50s in the winter, so that's coming up. But yeah, good stuff, man.
Yeah, man. So what about you? As far, I mean, I know we talked about a bunch of the hiccups, and to be honest, most of those hiccups have been on you.
Yeah,
because I've been kind of steady. So, not to knock on some wood, but what are some of the positives that you're looking up for or upcoming for you guys right now?
Just kind of what I said, the about the Aki clutches that should be hatching in like basically the next 2 weeks. Looking forward to that. They're from some newer females, so it's their first viable clutches. Had them paired up with a really nice male. So just, always curious to see kind of what pops out of the eggs. I love seeing those little tongue flicks. Got those going on. While I did lose a number of SAM monitor eggs, 3 of them look rock solid. So I'm still happy about that, The other clutch looks fine. The female's digging today. I expect her to be dropping. She's with a different male, so I'm really excited about that kind of thing. I have a feeling I got to make room because a lot of those will be held back. Let's see if it's successful. Got to see how it all goes. The imports, the tree monitor group, the Dorianus project.
Man, those Beckeri are huge.
Oh man, yeah.
That's a freaking blue tree's head. If I were to say them so myself.
Yeah, so the male, there's a trio. It's a male and two females, so really cool on that. But I mean, yeah, his head is massive. It's surprising how
Massive.
broad it is, and overall, he is a true like 36 inches, and
Wow, that's big. That's pretty good size.
yeah. So on the front of one of those wood cages, I actually marked 1 foot, 2 foot, and then the halves of everything, 2.5 up to 4 foot.
So you can measure.
Yeah. So I take him out and I hold him up to this cage, and he's like at 36 inches. So he's a big animal, and it's obvious the other two are females. They all look good. Oh, something funny that I should probably mention. I can make some assumptions maybe. The tree monitors came in with all kinds of ticks, right?
Yeah.
But it kind of would make sense for where they live. They're up in the trees. I don't know how much they even touch the ground or even see water, honestly. Not let alone soaking in water. So they came in full of ticks. You got other reptiles, rodents, birds up in those trees. So it's a part of their life. Now the Dorianus, all of the Dorianus across the board too, I know came in fresh, no ticks whatsoever on them. And we're talking about a 3.5 foot subadult and a 3 foot subadult. No ticks whatsoever. Literally like flawless looking animals.
You know what's crazy? Okay, so the not that ticks can't attach to them,
Right.
but I think it's the scales that they can't get into. The Dorianas don't have open scales. They don't have a scale that you can lift, and they don't really have much for grooves like a roughneck or even your tree monitors that have.
Right.
They're not scutes. They're not scutes, but they're sort of plated, right?
Right.
And so they can kind of get in between that. For me, what I find is the mangrove skins or the indicus type skins are like smooth. So I'm not sure if the ticks can really get and penetrate well.
See, I didn't think about that, but maybe that's true too. I was thinking it might have to do with the fact that I think the Dorianus are a lot more
Terrestrial
water monitor than
yeah.
I'm not saying they are water monitors. Just that they spend, because I've seen them soaking in water bowls. Now I have these just for fun. I have 2 babies in like this massive enclosure, and a lot of times they choose to sleep in these water bowls, even though they have really tight hides other places. They choose when lights go off to get into these water bowls, and just the way their tail is, compressed. And I just wonder if, and even where their nostrils are, I wonder if they spend more time, not like totally submerged like a water monitor, just gonna jump in a lake and start swimming. But if little waterways, little pockets of water, I wonder if they spend more time in there. And I also think that because of the way their teeth are.
Yeah, it's like a crab eating teeth.
Yeah, it just, there's so much. I want to go see them in the wild. That's what I want to do. And but
yeah.
See, the hard part is how do you track something in the jungle where it doesn't know you're there? It's so thick in some of these areas, I'm sure that it's going to know you're there before you ever see the animal. So
yeah. Good luck on running through that.
You're going to see an empty jungle because everything's on the backside of the trees.
Yeah.
And as you start to move, they just move around the tree. But so back to the things that are going good. So there was the green tree monitors. I think one might be gravid, which would be cool. 2 of them came in, just some of the most colorful animals I've ever seen. They have like the blue on the back, the red bellies, the yellow noses and throats. The blue tree that came in has a green back. And then the Dorianus have, as I described earlier, like this super crazy jeweled look with different colors all down their back. Still heavy black background, and then these bright spots of different colors. That's going on. All the other monitors seem to be doing fine. They handled the transition fine. The Savannah monitors are paired up in a big enclosure and are doing fine with each other. Had one little incident with a feeding thing where one grabbed the other one, the male who's bigger grabbed the female by the leg, left some decent lacerations. Truth is, I didn't do a thing about it, and she healed up fine. She's walking around fine now. It wasn't an attack of any sort. It was
Just a bite.
yeah. So I flung a chick, and when I flung it, part of the head came off one direction and the body went the other direction. You know, it's just I know it's kind of gross, but that's what happened. Well, the body went in the direction I meant it to. The head went in a different direction, kind of. Her foot was next to it. That was closest to him, and he went just for it. So it wasn't like an intentional thing. I turned my back, so I think that's what happened, because that's what makes sense as soon as I turned back. But so he bit her, but she healed up fine. And they seem to be getting along right now really well together. They're both showing some really good behaviors. I just started with the temperature. When I reintroduced them back into the cage, we had them set back up, threw dirt in there. I made sure that the substrate in there had a little more moisture in it. They have standing water now, which I had taken away. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm pretty excited about.
Nice, man.
Yeah. So I think that's
there's a lot.
There was I had this non-monitors, but I had a clutch of python eggs, and man, one of these just it's like this red.
Yeah, that hypo, right?
It's the hypo stonewash. Just it's like this red tiger striped thing. I don't know. I'm just in love with it. I go in and
I had a gentleman. I forget his name. I think it's Randy or something like that. But he just hatched some out too. Hypo Centrillion or something like that. He showed me a picture of it. He wants to trade a mangrove monitor for it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I told him. I was like, I guess.
Wait, is it Ralph?
I don't know if I want to know. Yeah, it's Ralph.
Ralph wants a monitor? Oh, you just started something.
He wants one monitor.
Ooh. One leads. Yeah. Don't tell him how it goes.
So it's Ralph Polinsky.
Yeah. He's got some great Centrillions of the bread line.
Yeah, he actually offered it to me, and I was actually considering it just because it's a gorgeous snake.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind. Yeah, but
then you'll have two. You see how this is going? The snake guys are getting the pythons.
Dude, he's like, I saw you post a Centrillion. What about this offer? So I was like, all right, I'll think about it. They haven't hatched yet, but yeah, he's been wanting one for a while. I think something went through where he was like supposed to get like a water monitor or something, but we talk about this all the time. Most people want a water monitor, but it's like a 10-12 foot cage you have to really incorporate.
Right.
That's so big for most people, so yeah.
Oh boy.
All right, man.
Yeah, we're about that 2 hour mark. So, hey, glad to be back. Thank you guys for being patient with us. We kind of explained some of the craziness. Khai, you went down and did the show. We didn't even, you know what? Yeah. We should maybe like recap that next time real quick to spend a little time.
Yeah. It was actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to catch them on that. But some expected stuff to see from us a little bit more, basically, since we got to kind of recharge and collect ourselves from all the mess of our normal monitor lives. We're basically trying to do things that where you guys are going to be able to relate to as far as newcomers getting into the breeding process, or just basically the beginning stages for you guys. So we're trying to break that down even more. We've got a couple guests coming in for just first time Aki breeders, first time things like that, where their insight on somewhat of amateurness and vulnerability to everything is going to be something that you guys may be able to relate to. And we try to really take that and run with that, because there's a lot to know, there's a lot to learn, there's many hiccups that you can face along the way. That's why they consider breeding monitors so difficult. Us, we see them all the time, we see eggs and stuff all the time, but it took quite a bit just to get there. Like I myself took 10-15 plus years to actually see eggs out of projects that I was studying and learning, so it's not just going to come soon. And we want to basically embrace a lot of the beginners in what you guys are doing and seeing how you guys are developing. All right.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we'll go on to the Morelia Python Radio network.com or .net. You can get there from both. And check out their website. Check out their Patreon if you'd like to help support not only our podcast, but all the podcasts. There's like 10 of them. Go on there and look around. You'll hear from some great guys. A lot of these guys are crossing over or have kept snakes, monitors. I mean, we're reptile people. We like it all. Some of these guys also have been over to some of these countries and just have great insight into what's going on or really interesting topics. You know, there's a new like rat or colubrids and colubroids show that's worth listening to if you're into that kind of stuff, especially, but also some of the stuff they had to think about, the kind of free thinking they had to implement in order to solve problems. And that's adaptable across the board, no matter what kind of reptile you're keeping. I love it when people think like that. I get to learn from it and benefit from it. Once you teach yourself how to do that, it changes the world for what you're capable of doing with your own animals. So,
right.
All right. I think that's it. Anything else, Khai?
No, I think that's it. We'll tune in for the next episode, you guys, and hopefully we'll see you guys back here. Feel free to message us or contact us. I'm typically on Facebook. I'm most responsive there as Khai Fan
now,
but you'll also be able to find me on Instagram at big_lizard103. That's one, the letter O, the number 3. And yeah, just keep us updated with questions you may have that you may want us to answer. And Alan, where can they find you at?
You can find me on Facebook at Origins Reptile or on Instagram at Origins_reptile. And then of course here on your podcast channel or whatever podcast app you're using, you can find us under the Monitor Keeping Podcast. So again, I still have people kind of, they'll add me as a friend. I know they see my name. I know how social media works, and I just want to make sure I'm not offending anybody if I'm not adding you.
We don't like you guys.
I got to keep myself separate. You know, you don't want to see pictures of my kids, 5th grade or 3rd grade, whatever, you know. I really don't talk about reptiles on that stuff. So it's
just message him on both. So he has to merge them together. That's what you guys do to me, man. I tried making my own pages. Basically, I just have to merge them together anyways. You know? So, but yeah, we try to keep somewhat separate.
Right.
Yeah.
So
try to. Well, thanks you guys for tuning in.
All right. Till next time.